So, looking at this figure from the vintage era, I actually got him. It was started off, he was a mail away. But this is probably Kenner's most interesting mistake, and that is the name. Now, depending on who you talk to, now somebody from, who's been collecting Star Wars, since the Kenner days, this figure is known as 4LOM. He has a droid counterpart named Zuckuss. Problem is, the Kenner swapped their names by accident, and but it stuck all the way through the vintage line. I mean, this came out. It was a mail-away figure in 1981. And actually was released in 1982, and that name stuck. He was 4LOM until 4 years after the vintage line was retired, and then they actually started changing the character's name because they realized that they had made that mistake so many years prior. And it was a lot of fun. Now it's in the modern era, when Power of the Force 2 started in 95, when they started to release these figures again with updates, which we'll look at in a minute. They corrected the names, or if you're a vintage guy, they reversed the names, and eventually, 15 years after Power of the Force 2 started, and in the vintage collection, there's a deep pack that actually celebrates this mistake, and we'll look at them now. Okay, so here are all of my 4LOM and Zuckuss action figures that I have. I don't have the vintage Zuckuss. I never got that one, but I did mail away for this guy back in the day. And like I said, this is the only one that had this type of material for the soft goods. It's kind of like a, I don't know, I would say pleather or vinyl. It's not like the vinyl capes like on an Obi-Wan or Vader. It's a little thicker. It's a really interesting soft goods cloak. And I'm glad. It's amazing how well this guy's held up over the years. And he looks really good. And again, like I said, in the vintage collection, or in the original vintage, he's 4LOM. Now in 95, after Hasbro took over the license, and they started with Power of the Force 2, they put the names in the quote-unquote correct fashion, so you end up with the Zuckuss and 4LOM. And I didn't get their weapons out, because I have these guys in my loose figure bin, so I didn't grab their accessories, but you can look at them. This is probably some of the better 5 points of articulation figures of the time. They would also do this is how they were doing cloaks then, but still a really decent figure for its time. I love the detail on them. Even this is late, was it 98? I think this came out, and these figures were good enough that I think it's the Saga collection. They released a multi-pack of these. There's slight repaint, definitely, to the Zuckuss. That it was the Hunt for the Millennium Falcon battle pack, and they were released with the rest of the bounty hunters from that scene in Empire Strikes Back, and a Vader figure, if I remember correctly. But again, a decent detail. I mean, this is the latter part of Power of the Force 2, so they're getting more accurate with their sculpts. And then later on, I think it was the Legacy collection, or I'm sorry, I believe it was the this figure, as an improvement. This was the 30th anniversary collection for LOM. I almost said Zuckuss. I'm just so used to doing that. But they, made him a lot more articulated. So he's got the ball joint elbow, swivel wrists, swivel head, but there's a torso here and swivel hips and ball jointed knees and ankles. I mean, and this is also a good time for collecting. And look at the detail on this weapon. Given the stock a different color like that. And he was re-released in the vintage collection by himself. And this Zuckuss came out in the Legacy collection. And again, he's also got the ball jointed elbows, swivel head. He's got a swivel waist. But, this kind of the comma piece here. It's a nice cloth. And really good articulation. I honestly think this is, near perfection for a figure. The ball jointed knees. I mean, it's got great articulation, excellent detail, really good likeness of the character for something you only see for a few frames in Empire Strikes Back, but still, an excellent figure. I still display him. I think I've got him in I fish this guy out of my Java's Palace display. And but always like as a kid, as a cool bug looking alien. So it's always neat to collect these figures. This is going to drop out 50 times. If it falls again, I'm leaving it. But yeah, okay, we'll just forget it. Now the reason I wanted to do this video, and I love that they did this, was, it's probably the most celebrated mistake Kenner ever made. But for Celebration 5, they came out with this special 2-pack. And as you can see, they did an homage to the cards there with the original naming mistake. So that's just the sleeve over top of it for Celebration 5. You can see in this nice foil, and on the flip it around to the back. There he is. And the beauty of it is they took, I'll show that I have the loose figures as you can see there, but and you open the pack up, it's that some little Velcro here to keep it closed in the pack, but they have nice vintage cards all protected in there, and showing that. And then they even have on the side here, I'll bring it up so you can read it, and it says, this is the Bounty Hunters 30th anniversary exclusive. And it says, while 4LOM and Zuckuss are now quite well known to fans, their proper names were initially a topic of considerable debate. When Kenner first produced the figures, the names somehow got reversed, but since these two bounty hunters were not identified in the film, the switch was not immediately noticed. When the mix-up was finally caught and corrected in 1989, Zuckuss and 4LOM finally got back their rightful identities. In this exclusive set, we are paying homage to the first appearance of these bounty hunters that puzzled so many for years, with replicas of the original packaging switched the names and all. So, it's a great drawing of the two there. And again, I love what they did with these guys. I actually have, if you see in my room tour, there's a small part where I have a bunch of Mandalorian figures and bounty hunters and stuff together. And but they went back and look at the figures. They went back to like the original vintage colors, because if I had a vintage Zuckuss, I could, vintage Zuckuss here, I could put them together, and their colors are pretty much the same. It came with a very similar blaster rifle. And then, but again, I mean, just I love the detail on it. It's basically the same figure as this Legacy Collection 30th anniversary version as far as articulation and detailing. It's just the paint apps have been changed, so to more represent the vintage figure. And again, he just looks great. I love it. That Hasbro went and did this, and I was able to add them to my collection. This was back in 2010. So, but another one is, looking at this, they lighten the figure up. So, the color's not exact here, but it's, brightened up. But if you look, they use the similar material on the comma piece here as they did for the cloak on the vintage. And I just thought that was a really nice touch. So it was, another great display piece. And a great look at the action figure. And they did a wonderful job. And I love the fact that they decided to point out this most wonderful error, quote unquote, that happened with these figures back in the early 80s. It's just nice for old hats like me who've been collecting this stuff for such a long time, just to see it like that. And so it's just a neat way to look at these figures, and just the fact, just to pay a little attention to the history is really great. So let's wrap up this video for now. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Do you have this? Which way? Actually, I would like to know, how do you refer to these figures now? Do you go, do you go by their correct names, or do you go by their original, quote unquote, wrong names? Is it 4LOM and Zuckuss, or is it Zuckuss and 4LOM? Let me know. And thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.
Remember, the Force will be with you always. The Force will be with you.